Chicago, the third largest metropolitan area in the United States. 6 million people, home to one of the NFL's founding franchises, the Chicago Bears, a team with more history than almost any other in professional football. The Bears, the 1985 Super Bowl Shuffle, Walter Payton, Dick Butkus, George Halas, Mike Ditka, legends who defined the game. Their home? Soldier Field, one of the oldest and most iconic venues in American sports. A stadium that's hosted everything from college football championships to presidential speeches to heavyweight boxing matches. And yet, Chicago has never hosted a Super Bowl. Not once, not ever. And if the NFL has its way, it never will. The reason? In one word, size. To understand why Soldier Field will never host a Super Bowl, we need to talk about 2003. The year Chicago thought it was upgrading to the future and instead created one of the most controversial stadium renovations in sports history. Soldier Field originally opened in 1924. For nearly 80 years, it was a massive concrete coliseum with classical Greek columns, a monument to American soldiers. Capacity? Over 100,000 at its peak. When the Bears moved in permanently in 1971, capacity was reduced to about 57,000 to improve sightlines. By the 1990s, the stadium was aging, outdated, uncomfortable. The Bears threatened to leave Chicago if the city didn't renovate. So in 2001, Chicago approved a $690 million renovation. Not a complete rebuild, they wanted to preserve the historic facade. The plan? Keep the iconic colonnades and columns on the outside, but demolish everything inside and build a completely modern stadium. When it opened in 2003, critics were not kind. A spaceship landed on the stadium. An alien toilet seat dropped inside concrete columns. The Eyesore on the Lakeshore. Monstrosity on the Midway. Chicago Tribune architecture critic Blair Kamin absolutely savaged it. Even acclaimed architect Stanley Tigerman, a Chicago native, called it a fiasco. But the aesthetic disaster wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the capacity. The new Soldier Field? 61,500 seats. Down from over 66,000 before the renovation. The NFL's smallest stadium. Here's the problem. The NFL has an unofficial requirement that Super Bowl venues must have at least 70,000 seats. Why? Because demand for Super Bowl tickets is astronomical. Corporate sponsors need their allotments. Each team's fans want tickets. The NFL needs to accommodate its VIPs. Local season ticket holders want access. With only 61,500 seats, Soldier Field is almost 9,000 seats short of the threshold. Now, you might say, wait, didn't Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis host a Super Bowl with just 63,000 seats? And you'd be right. Super Bowl 46 in 2012, Giants versus Patriots. But here's the key difference. Lucas Oil Stadium temporarily expanded capacity to 68,000 for the Super Bowl. They brought in temporary seating. They maximized every available space. And most importantly, Lucas Oil Stadium has a retractable roof. Soldier Field has no dome, no retractable roof, just open-air seating exposed to whatever Chicago's brutal February weather throws at it. And unlike Lucas Oil, Soldier Field has no room to expand. The stadium is completely enclosed. The lower bowl is sunken into the ground. The upper deck is locked in place by the historic facade they preserved. There's literally nowhere to put temporary seats without destroying the very thing that makes Soldier Field historically significant. So Chicago spent $690 million on a renovation and made their stadium less capable of hosting a Super Bowl than it was before. But even if Soldier Field had 70,000 seats, there's still the weather problem. Chicago in February is cold. Average high, 38 degrees. Average low, 22 degrees. Now, we know the NFL held Super Bowl 48 in New Jersey with similar temperatures, but that was New York, the nation's largest media market and home of NFL headquarters. The league made an exception. Chicago doesn't get that luxury, and Chicago's weather can be brutal. Rick Telander, a longtime sports columnist, once wrote about why Chicago shouldn't host a Super Bowl, pointing to December 24, 1983, when the temperature dropped to 23 below zero with a wind chill of 82 below. Now, the Super Bowl is held in early February, not late December, and Telander was being a bit dramatic. Chicago's average temperature during Super Bowl week is actually comparable to what New Jersey experienced. But here's the thing, the NFL doesn't want to risk it. Not when they can hold the game in Miami, New Orleans, Los Angeles, Phoenix, or any other warm weather city with perfect weather and plenty of hotel rooms. Which brings us to another critical problem: infrastructure. A Super Bowl requires 30,000 hotel rooms within an hour's drive. Chicago has those. It requires extensive public transportation. Chicago has that too. Multiple airports, world-class restaurants, concert venues, museums. Chicago checks all those boxes. But when you combine the small stadium capacity, the cold weather, and the lack of a dome, Chicago just doesn't make the cut. Here's an irony that perfectly captures Soldier Field's Super Bowl problem. The 2003 renovation was so controversial, so jarring to the stadium's historic character, that the National Park Service removed Soldier Field from the National Register of Historic Places in 2006. Think about that. The renovation was supposed to modernize the stadium while preserving its history. Instead, it destroyed the historic designation while also making the stadium too small for a Super Bowl. It's the worst of both worlds. And now, in 2024 and beyond, the Bears are once again considering their options. They've looked at building a new stadium in Arlington Heights, a suburb about 25 miles from downtown. They've explored building a new domed stadium right next to Soldier Field on the lakefront. Why? Because they know Soldier Field, in its current form, is holding them back. It's the smallest stadium in the NFL. It can't host a Super Bowl. It limits revenue potential. But moving out of Soldier Field is complicated. The Chicago Park District owns the stadium. The city has deep emotional ties to the location. The view of the Chicago skyline from the south end zone is iconic. The Bears have played at Soldier Field since 1971. It's their home. Leaving would be like the Packers abandoning Lambeau. So they're stuck with a stadium that's too small, too cold, too inflexible, unofficially banned from ever hosting the NFL's biggest game. Let's put this in perspective. Chicago is the third largest metropolitan area in the United States, behind New York and Los Angeles. New York has hosted a Super Bowl. Los Angeles has hosted multiple Super Bowls. Cities with smaller populations than Chicago, like Phoenix, Tampa, New Orleans, Minneapolis, and Miami, have hosted multiple Super Bowls. But Chicago? Never. It's not for lack of trying. There have been whispers over the years, proposals floated, feasibility studies conducted. After Super Bowl 48 in New Jersey proved that cold weather outdoor games could work, some wondered if Chicago might get a chance. Sports business consultant Mark Gannis said Soldier Field's constraints make it very difficult to make it Super Bowl ready and would require major capital costs. Translation: it's not happening. The city would need to either build a brand new domed stadium with 70,000 plus seats or extensively renovate Soldier Field in ways that would cost hundreds of millions of dollars and might not even be physically possible given the stadium's footprint. So Chicago continues to be one of the great sports cities in America, with passionate fans, deep football history, and all the infrastructure needed to host a major event, yet permanently shut out from hosting the Super Bowl. All because in 2003, they built a stadium that was too small, too open, and too controversial. Soldier Field will always be special. It's where the Bears won championships, where legends like Walter Payton ran, where the fridge became a cultural icon, where the monsters of the Midway built their legacy. But a Super Bowl? That's one thing this historic stadium will never see. The NFL's message to Chicago is clear. If you want to host the biggest game in sports, you need a bigger stadium, preferably with a roof. And definitely not one that looks like an alien spaceship crashed into a Greek temple. Soldier Field remains unofficially banned from hosting the Super Bowl. And unless the Bears build a new stadium, which they're actively considering, Chicago will remain the largest city in America to never host the NFL's championship game. Next time, Denver's Empower Field at Mile High, the stadium where elevation is an advantage for the home team and a deal breaker for the Super Bowl.